I'm going to do. Okay. So there are a lot of people on. What I'm going to do is do roll call from the official agenda online. If I do miss you and you are, I do feel you're on the committee, please let us know, right? And we'll get that corrected. So Nidia Bello, I don't see her on. Dr. Ed Bond, don't see on. Cynthia Carrillo, don't see on. Lakshmi Chari, don't see on. Brett Banducci, don't see on. Gloria Rodriguez, I think we got a, I think I saw her. All right, got her. I got a winner. Jeff Kita,
Present.
yeah. Donald Foster, Kasaw.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Richard Castañero. Didn't see him come in.
I can turn it off anytime. It's a
Hold on.
Zoom.
Kurt Schmel is here. Emma Posadas. I don't see. Dr. Lydia Levo. I don't see. Fabiola Gomez. I don't see. Trustee Jeremy. Oh, she is.
Yeah.
Oh, there she is. Okay. Sorry. I'm switching back and forth really quick between the browser and the Zoom. So great. Trustee Mead is present. Todd McWhorter is present. John Marquez. Don't think I see. Dr. David Moore is present. Lorenzo Marasa. Don't think I see. Kevin Olson. See.
Here.
Mark Robertson.
Present.
Ilda Sanchez. Don't see her. Dan Singer. He's at a conference, I know. Leslie Cornejo. I don't see. Me, Dr. Daniel Sandoval, and Jeff Weinstein. So we've got a crew. All right. If we could,
Can I make one announcement? Dr. Sandoval, it's Chris Inez. I'm representing Ilda Sandoval today.
Oh, okay.
Sanchez. Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. So let's see. If we could go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. I do see a chat. Liz Garcia present. Liz, I missed you. Sorry. How did I miss that? Oh, you were way up there. All right. Sorry about that. Yes, Dr. Garcia is present. Okay, so can I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Or indicate aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, do we have any public comments?
No public
at this
comment.
meeting? All right, so let's get right into it. 3A, strategic plan overview.
So I guess
Dr. Weiss.
I'll take away the lead on this. So last time we met, if you weren't here, what we did was we went over the blueprint or the guidelines of how we're going to move forward with our strategic plan. One of those guidelines is an overriding guideline, which is our educational part of our plan. So the plan is communication, engagement, there's a lot of different factors to it, but its overriding is the improvement of the educational process. So what we wanted to do was in our strategic plan today to go over that part and then once everybody's kind of on the same page of what we're doing, then show the impact to facilities, resources, programs, and those type of things. And then we can start getting a full picture of what our facilities need to be in order to support the educational process that we want our students to have. So as many of you know, we've taken on initiatives of literacy and mathematics, but in the center of all that is a concept of really getting to know our student. So I'm going to turn it over to David Moore, Dr. Moore, to talk a little bit about that.
Can you see the screen? Okay, good. All right. So I'll just go through and talk a little bit about the strategic plan and some of the initiatives that we're doing. So the strategic plan that is being developed is pardon? Oh, no. Okay. The strategic plan is the kind of the umbrella, and in the underneath that is the learner. So all of our students, the most important thing that that we do as a school is to make sure that we are developing our learners and getting them college, career, and life ready. That is the goal. So off to the left, we have our academic initiatives, and those are fully underway right now with the TK2 literacy. That PD started in the summer and is continuing through October. And then we have our CGI math that began with our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers in the summer and is also in the works. And then we have the P3CC, which is being overseen right now by Dr. Ramirez, and she took that over last year. And the P3CC math really works in tandem with our CGI math. The focus this year, we've got those 3 initiatives going on at the elementary level. Our focus this year is the secondary teaching and learning and secondary professional development. So really looking at what the needs are at the middle and high school levels in terms of instruction and instructional delivery. To the far right, we have partnered with the Learner-Centered Collaborative. So I know most all of you were at the Design Day, and Dr. Devin Vadichka started the Learner-Centered Collaborative. So we're working with them, and we have our first Guiding Coalition meeting on September 23rd, and we're going to be developing the learner profile during that time. The learner profile answers the question, what does a Santa Paula Unified School District learner look like? And so really putting all of those characteristics in place of an SPUSD learner. And then we have our Design Day. The Design Day answers the question, what do our schools need to look like to develop the kind of learners as identified in the learner profile? So we began our Design Day last year answering the question, what do we want our schools to be known for or known as? And so the staff at each one of the sites has really come together and narrowed, is in the process of narrowing that focus. So all of those 4 things that you see, 2 on the right and 2 on the left, all point back to the what we're doing for our students here in our district. And again, the umbrella for everything that we do is our strategic plan. We are starting this year, they're in the process of being developed, our instructional leadership teams. And the instructional leadership teams, each site level will have one of those, and the instructional leadership teams will be monitoring data, all kinds of data, academic achievement data, the CASP scores. We will be looking at attendance data, social emotional learning, all of the different data points that we can have impact in terms of developing the whole child. So we just wanted to give you a picture of how all of this is fitting together. We hear all of the different initiatives going on, but all of them, again, point back to what we're doing for the learner. And again, the strategic plan encompasses all of that.
So I'd like to point out that the Learner Center Collaborative is done by each site. So we're not looking for the learner completely, the Santa Paula USD learner, but which individual sites, what did they have identified as their learner profile at that particular site? And it also can relate to certain grade levels. So obviously, you know, although all the same students go from Isbell to the high school at once, the idea really is have they changed their learner profile as they've made that adjustment, their age, their maturity, because it all goes into not only their academic, but their 21st century skill learning, their career and college readiness, as well as their ability to be able to learn about their emotions, behaviors, and controlling them, and also being more socially, emotionally aware of their surroundings and what are triggers for them to prevent them from learning. So, for instance, if a child, you know, doesn't have to get in trouble to be prevented from learning, there could be triggers within the classroom that make them want to shut down. They don't want to participate. So the idea really is as we learn those learner profiles of the different types of learners we have, then we adjust our pedagogies and our strategic teaching skills in order to best suit that child, rather than having all the children have to learn the way we want them to learn. We're going to find out how they learn, and then we're going to change the way we kind of do some of our lessons and you know, try some new things. Now, obviously, we have incredibly great teachers, and we're not telling them or trying to change you know, their overall teaching. But what we are trying to do is to give them little skills in order to better understand maybe why one student is easily getting this and another student isn't. And we can look at ourselves and say, you know, some people are really good with numbers and analytical, and they can really understand a algorithm, you know, right away because they look at it and they get it. It's easy. But another person may need, you know, more graphic or pictures or more explanation verbally and orally in order for them to understand manipulatives, some of them understand fractions and different things like that. So rather than asking everybody just to look at an algorithm and say, hey, you know, this is the algorithm, figure it out. We're trying to find out the best way a learner learns and then adjust how we approach each type of standard in order to make sure that they capture the standards. And that's one of the things that's really not in this screen. And I think it's important for us to understand that previously, for the most part, our teaching has been textbook and you know, backwards mapping planned, you know, pacing guide planned. And so the idea is to kind of say, look, you know, you don't have to be on chapter 2 by this particular date or chapter 3 by this particular date. The idea is, has your students captured the standards that they need to capture? Do we need to reteach? In making sure they get them before they move on. And teachers shouldn't be, you know, looking at the pacing guide as a Bible that they can't do anything outside that pacing guide, even though they know at the end of maybe a chapter, their students are really struggling. They in the past, they were pressured to keep moving towards the end result. And a lot of it had to do with the testing that we were doing. In other words, so if they didn't have everything done by the time a periodic testing was done, then they felt like, oh, there's a reason why my kids are not scoring so high. So the idea is to kind of take that all away. Obviously, testing and data is really important, but the idea is to really now test to the standards and make sure they understand the standards. So with this overall arching plan, we now look at design day. And so one of the things that we're looking at is what programs or what vehicles can help our students, first of all, love school and are really interested in their own learning and be invested in their own learning through these design day enrichment programs, as well as, you know, how do we as a school want to be known as? What do we want people to say? You know, I go to McKevitt, you know, my kids go to McKevitt, and McKevitt has a great music program, or, you know, whatever that is. And that's just their overall vehicle in which they'll assist in all these other areas of learning. And so we have, as we bring the sixth graders back next year, that is an impact to our facilities. As we bring preschool in, that's an impact to our facilities. But design day, those enrichment programs may also impact our facilities. So it's really becomes vitally important that by the end of this semester, we have a great understanding of how many classrooms are available that are not being used for teaching. I know we have a lot of classrooms being used for different things, but are not being used for teaching. And, you know, what sites will need help in order to not only fit in their sixth graders, but also to fit in their design day enrichment programs, which could be STEAM, STEM, visual performing arts, music, whatever, world language, whatever they want to do. And then one of the other areas that we're very interested in is project-based learning. Project-based learning really speaks to children's 21st century skills of creative thinking, critical thinking, cooperation, collaboration, communication. So what that does is we not only concentrate on the project-based learning for the project itself that may relate to the curriculum, but we also have them do reflective practices on how they use their 21st century skills in either to achieve what they wanted to achieve or not achieve what they want to achieve. So a student may say, you know what, I worked with 2 other students on this project and I didn't really communicate much. They did most of the work. I really wasn't a good team member. And then that's part of the learning also, because as you know, in our business world and in you know, schools as teachers, we all work together and we work with each other. And it's important that our students understand that. So with that, we have to start with our first impact to our facilities, which is demographics. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Olson to talk about the overall demographics. But first, does anybody have any questions on what we just went over? And I cannot see everybody. So Dr. Sandoval, you can help out with that.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
You can either chime in or you can raise your hand.
I just don't want to move on before, you know, if anybody needs to ask a question. Okay.
You know, I have one.
Oh, no. Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm just curious, and this is more for David.
Mhm.
Well, here's a
Oh,
question
Hi,
from
David.
Susan. Hold on. No, here's a question from Susan. I'll go with her first. How are teachers supposed to be supported with the changes in fluidity of teaching? Hope that makes sense.
Well, David, you can speak to the training, the PDs and the initiatives that we're going in for professional development for all our teachers.
Right. So the idea and the reason why we are having this be a collaborative process, and we're involving even our classified staff members involved in this, because we know that it takes all of us to run the school. It's every adult in the building doing our best to service students. We are making this a collaborative effort, and we're not moving super fast with this. And we are going to take a look at the different ideas that you have and that you're wanting your site, the direction that you're wanting your site to go in. And then we're going to match the professional development to that focus at your site. So one of the differences that you'll see is you're going to see our district now different from an initiative. We have our K2 literacy initiative, our math initiative. You're going to see more professional development focused on the brand or the focus of your particular school. So there won't be a one-size-fits-all approach to professional development. So the idea is to make sure that as we move forward with our school focuses, our design, that we are matching that with the training that teachers will need and making sure that they are supported in that way. So we're not just gonna say, as some districts do, we're not just gonna say you're a STEAM school or you're a STEM school or you're a visual performing arts school, and the teachers really have no input on that. You have input on that, and you'll also have input on naming some of the professional development and training that you will need in order to make that successful at your site. I hope that answers your question.
David,
Uh-huh.
it would be, I think it would be also a little bit helpful to talk about how the guiding coalition fits into this work.
Okay, so the guiding coalition, again, adding to what our superintendent said, we are developing a learner. We're going to develop a learner profile for our students. And generally, I wish I had one to share with you that other districts. I know Oxnard School District, I'm not sure it was a high school, one of the districts in Oxnard Elementary or high school, they just completed their learner profile. And generally, what a learner profile does is it addresses the academic needs of a school or the academic needs of a student, the social emotional needs of a student, and sometimes the behavioral needs, because that's a different component as well. So we start looking at qualities or characteristics that we want to focus on for our students here in Santa Paula. And that becomes whatever characteristic or quality that the guiding coalition chooses. And there's usually 7 or 8 that make up the whole child. Then the programs and the practices that we have in at our sites support developing that particular characteristic or that particular part of the child. So, for example, some districts choose they'll choose something around math and analytical thinking or different things like that. So the programs that they focus on, whether it's engineering or technology, help to develop that kind of thinking within the student, so that we know that when a student gets up to or goes through our K-12 system, all of those characteristics that we have determined or qualities that we've determined in the learner profile, our students are equipped and ready as learners, and we've addressed all those areas as a district. So the learner-centered collaborative, their first piece of their work will be to help us develop that learner-centered learner profile. And then the next piece of their work will be to help us develop our programming at our sites to help us make sure that the programs and the things that we're doing for students actually are building those characteristics or qualities within the student.
So I'll add one more little caveat to that is, our design day, again, we're asking our staff to talk about what the students love, what the students are interested in, what this really, makes them, happy, and what you believe that they will get behind. So the idea behind this, and the best way I can describe it is, I'm a director of a physical horseback riding therapy unit called Carousel Ranch in Santa Clarita. And Carousel Ranch has little children's 2 years old through 10 years old, doing physical therapy on horseback. Now, they could do physical therapy at the physical therapist's office, but the idea is kids want to do what they want to do. And most kids don't want to go to physical therapy. What they want to do is they want to go ride horses. And so they're actually receiving physical therapy while they're riding the horse, and all they know is, hey, this is really fun, I'm riding the horse. And that's kind of the idea of the enrichment program, is that, hey, this is music, this is, oh, robotics are so cool, and we're building things and doing things. But what they're really doing is they're learning math, they're using their communication skills, they're doing all these other things that enhance their overall learning profile.
Right. And I'll add to that. I don't want to take up all of the talking time here, but I'll add to that, because we hear, I've heard a couple of times, well, that with this design day, where are we talking about academic, or where are we talking about student achievement? And I said in one of the meetings about a week ago, when we were talking with our site leaders about design day, I was bold and said, we're not talking about student achievement here. What we're talking about, designing schools that students want to come to. What we know is that if we can impact our schools in such a way that our students, when they wake up in the morning, they say, I can't miss school today because I'm a part of this program, or I have this club, or there's this activity going on, then we're guaranteeing an increase in seat time. And while we're working on making our schools innovative, bringing some of that fun factor back, we're increasing seat time, which at the same time, then we're working with our teachers, as we're starting to do on the professional development side, to shore up the instruction and how they're creating lessons and how they're delivering instruction. So we're increasing seat time when students are in the seat and there's good quality instruction going on. Then you start seeing an increase in academic achievement, and that's our aim. I will say this: we've got some pretty. If you tour some of the classrooms across our district, we have some really great things going on in some of the classrooms. The teachers are working hard, but at the same time, we also have cases where it's one worksheet after another, and so we have to address that, because while 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when we were filling out worksheets, our students are a little bit more, they expect a little bit more in terms of keeping their engagement, increasing their engagement, and keeping them focused. And so we have to make changes in the way we deliver instruction. Schools across the country are doing that. And so, again, we're seeing exciting things. We're seeing some really cool things across the district. Like before this work even started, teachers were already doing those great things. But we know that we have to increase that even more and impact instruction even more across the district. And so that's why we're doing that.
Okay, are there further questions or comments? Going once, going twice. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next item, the demographic study. Mr. Olson, give us the numbers.
All right, I have an updated demographic study to show you guys. Let me share. It wants to be on screen one. Okay. So we have PowerPoint. Everybody can see the PowerPoint here? Yes, okay. All right, so real quick, the agenda for the PowerPoint. We have updates from the 8/17 meeting around the different elementary school demographics. Part of the discussion, we did talk about the high school capacity. There were some concerns, so I've brought some numbers regarding the high school. Key portions of the update were elementary school capacity, including 6th grade, and with a little bit of a acceleration on the TK numbers of the attendance there, because we talked about that for a little while, and recognizing that we're already accepting all 4-year-olds. We've accelerated that uptick a little bit. And then we're going to look at a map, some proposed elementary school zoning scenarios. So here. All right, so just to kind of further elaborate, the high school and looking at that utilization, we right now for the last number of years, they've been kind of at maximum capacity, teachers sharing rooms, utilizing many different spaces on campus. Power School has what they call a max capacity for all of our schools. It's not, really about going to every single room and multiplying that by the maximum attendance. It's a little bit more nebulous than that, but it is about right for all of our schools, and it does show that the high school is over their maximum capacity. The elementary utilization with the 6th grade again, and some boundary maps for consideration. Really just like a quick and not really we're not going to zoom in on our boundary map or really worry about which side of the road we're on, but just some general like what if discussion here. So here's the high school capacity examination. You can see in the bottom, open seats, for the last few years has been in the red there. You do see that. So right now we are in the shaded 22 column there. And you can see 11th grade is kind of our bubble. And as that drops off into 24, as those students become seniors in 23 and graduates to 24, that the entering freshman class of that year will be less students. So at that point, they'll have 8 seats supposedly, but they'll be down from that peak of close to 1,800, 1,750 students at the school. And you can see that even including the generated students from the development, that we're going to kind of continue to get some capacity at the high school. Are there any questions about that discussion?
I have one question, right? Just following the cohort, right? So if we look at, say, this year's 2022 grade 9, 375. In 2025, when they're seniors, do we really lose that many kids? Right, from 375 to 299. No, what is it? No, 375 to 295.
Yeah, down to 295 there. They're using a few different models here, not just cohorting, but also in general, we have a percentage decrease on average. You can see that from 18 to 21 are basically actuals. And you can see from 18, our 9th grade was 486. And in 21, when they're seniors, it's down to 377. So it does appear to be following the kind of traditional numbers that we've had. And it does, I think that some other people on here might be able to chime in, but normally we have more of your seniors and people switching over, juniors and seniors switching over to, say, Renaissance to catch up and graduate from there as they figure out that that's maybe a better learning space for them. So I think that probably in 11th to 12th grade, some of those drops we see, it might not be that we're losing them within the district, but they're probably jumping over to Renaissance at that point.
Yeah, so Renaissance capacity is about 130 max, really 125, but they've been as high as 129. And they're mostly, for the better part, 90% 11th and 12th graders. And so, that's why you'll see, at least 60 or 70 of those kids from 9th grade will probably end up in 2020 or 2021 at Renaissance.
Yeah. So right, as we're from that drop probably from 10th grade to to 11th grade, you know, we're seeing that kind of going over to Renaissance probably there. So without any other questions, I'll move on to the elementary discussion. Sorry, there's some little bit tighter numbers here, and we don't have to dig in.
Actually, Mr. Olson,
Yes.
with, I'm going to play devil's advocate here with the high school numbers for a minute. If we are successful with the initiatives to bring in and retain and get our students more actively involved in wanting to be in school, are we going to see those numbers tail off the way they have? Is this one of those, we're going to be a victim of our own success in a couple years if we don't account for that, because now we made our building somewhere where the kids want to be, as opposed to those who drop off because of lack of interest or better opportunities elsewhere?
Sure. I think it's a great question. You know, hopefully we increase our retention overall, but I think that if you look at these numbers as they start to get out into the out years, 25, 26, you know, we're seeing a pretty significant capacity. And once again, we know that we were operating at 1725. And so we're talking, when we get into 2026, we're looking at 1347. So even though the bottom line here says the capacity is 125, the delta between there, between negative 247 and, you know, 150 here is close to 400 students. So yeah, hopefully we get better at retaining and keeping the students interested and engaged. But I think that a lot of it that we're still seeing just smaller cohorts, you know, coming up through the elementary school. So even if we don't have that kind of matriculation of small losing students throughout, we're just seeing smaller cohorts coming up. So I still think that we're gonna end up with less of a capacity issue at the high school. We've already basically, even if we're not going to see this peak kind of again, this peak numbers.
Kevin, just a real quick question now we're back on this screen. So when we look at 2023 on the bottom, 2024, 25, 26, 27-ish, it's about 200 students. Is that included in the upper graph, or is that we add that to that graph?
It looks to me like we would add that to this graph, because
Okay,
it's up above, it's a SANS development graph,
right.
and below are students generated. So SANS development means they've taken out the development, so we've kind of separated those two. So
Okay,
yeah, you can see in 25 we have maybe 42 kids, and in 25 we have space of 94 kids. So it does bring them a little bit closer together. But I think as we start to talk about the elementary enrollment, you'll see also that when we include the development, our overall enrollment is fairly flat. SANS development is, you know, drops off pretty substantially. So the development isn't necessarily meaning that our enrollment to the district is going to grow. It's just helping us stay level. Does that make sense to everybody? No, it's kind of hard to hear a little bit, but so let's look at those numbers real quick.
Kevin, sorry, I hate to keep interrupting you, but I've worked with, you know, this company before. So normally when they give us the projections, they'll say, here's our really conservative projection, here's our, you know, moderate, here's our optimistic projection. So the ones that we're seeing on the screen, is that their most conservative projection? Because that's what it seemed like the demographer was saying when last time we met. Like he's saying, I think most conservative, you're going to be flat.
This is kind of somewhere in between right here. So I think on the development side, and I think we have the numbers, we have last meeting's information as an addendum to the new slides here. and we can shoot over to those if you want. But I think when he was discussing the students generated from the residential development, that's where they're still taking a pretty conservative approach. So they're looking at, you know, less than one student generated per household. And since we have all single family houses over there, on average, and we've discussed this with the developer, they're seeing on average over 3 people move into each house, which means you're generally getting 2 adults and a kid. You know, what age that student is, they have some algorithms that help us separate out whether we are generating an elementary student, a middle school student, or a high school student. Every time we get a household filled over there. But overall, those numbers are conservative as far as the student generation from the development. And I think that's good because right now, even though the developer says that they're seeing, you know, 3.2 average people moving into a household, we are definitely not having that conversion rate of students generated for our school district at this point. And we have a number of reasons why we think that is, you know, including the fact that we don't have a school over there, we don't have transportation over there, and or people are probably already commuting back to wherever their job is, and they're going to keep their kiddos closer to work, you know, school choicing into a school closer to work. So there's a number of reasons why we might not be converting students at this point. But that's also one of the reasons why we think that a school in that area will be beneficial for the school district. So let's look over here. So these are now TK through 6 projections. And once again, they're the SANS development projections. You can see Bedell and Blanchard kind of on the edges of town for us, both really losing students pretty quickly. Bedell, in just a few years, under 200 students. We know enrollment right now is in the low 200s at the moment. So, you know, that area that they're servicing right now is not having a lot of development, not having a lot of new families moving in. So we're aging out really quickly out of that community and losing students. So there's capacity there. Blanchard on this end of town, also kind of similar situation. We do know that there's some developments proposed on this side of town in different levels of development right now. People's Place actively being built. That's 69 new apartment units. And then we have the Kmart area where there's proposals to build quite a few townhomes and things over there, although it's not as far along in that development. Glen City, right in the middle of town, kind of remaining pretty robust as far as their enrollment students goes. Same with McKevitt. You know, overall, while that school has been, I think, over 400 in the past, and even while I was here was in the high 300s, they're dropping down pretty quickly, below 300 and into the mid 200s.
Can you go back really quick?
Hmm?
Or just to Glen City, the TK line.
Gets huge.
That doesn't make any sense. I mean, to be honest,
I think it's because at this point the Blanchard, because Blanchard doesn't have a TK room this year, they haven't added a TK room to Blanchard. So you know, a big part of the work that we have ahead of us is balancing the schools. And as the TK program continues to grow, we'll have to add more classrooms at these schools. So at this point, they've put the TK kids that are in the Blanchard area into the Glen City school because at this point, that's where they think that we have TK. So we'll be able to balance those numbers.
doesn't TK have a smaller student to teacher ratio?
22, I want to say, is the
And-
agreement.
Yeah, 22 is I believe is in the CVA. Todd can speak to that, but I believe, Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, CDE talks 20-1, right?
Yeah, there's
That's
talks
right.
of going 20-1. I know the preschools we've talked about are 20-1, but the class size is 22 to 1 in the CBA. And
Okay.
right now, I believe that the ed code is like 12-1 on the adult to student, but they have been talking about going to the 10-1, which would then make it, no matter what we have in the CBA, either putting the third adult in or going at 20. Since I'm talking, can I ask a question, Kevin?
Sure.
Like, I'm confused as to why we're spending a lot of time on numbers without development, because clearly we're gonna have the development, right?
Mm-hmm. So it's more about demonstrating kind of where our current student population is and which schools they're going to. Because, you know, what the issue is really that where our schools are laid out at the moment, we have a couple of schools in the middle of town, we have a couple of schools on the edges of town, and then we kind of have two schools on the east side of town. You know, Thiel will border the development, and Webster borders the development, and so in the capacity at those schools, Webster will have pretty significant capacity, but Thiel is remaining, you know, kind of strong enrollment. And so really the discussion here is about, you know, when we add the development in, once again, we're fairly flat, but we have a movement within the city of where our students are being generated. And so that's really, I think, what we need to come to grips with and discuss how we're servicing our students within the areas that they live, and the fact that so many of our students will be living on the east side of town once these 2,000 plus houses are in place. So that's kind of the thesis statement, I suppose. And I don't know if we want to glance at the last two here. You know, I think we're looking at these directly so that everybody can build confidence in kind of what we're talking about for the most part.
I mean, so, I mean, the takeaway really of these is that if we didn't have the development, right, Thiel and Glen City are relatively, like, it's not going to change, right? They're relatively stable enrollments, right? But then that's with the caveat that all TK is going to Glen City on the west side of town, right? Because that's a big spike on the TK for Glen City. So that makes their numbers look better, right? Because of just the choice of having TK there, right? All the other schools are losing significant enrollment projection. I mean, is that relatively?
I think that's a true statement. Yeah, I think that's a true statement. And so something that I think we need to consider is looking at our boundaries, and just working with Power School, you know, kind of step one within their software. We can look at the drive time to schools, how long it takes to make sure that nobody ever lives too far away from a school, but then overall just trying to balance out the enrollment within all of our schools. And so, you know, once again, the real question at hand is, should we be building a school in Harvest? And I think that, you know, we have opportunity to use 8.3 acres over there, plus have the joint use agreement with the city to access the open space and the parks and areas for our schools, so we can have a fairly significant a facility over there. But then we have kind of the middle of town here, where there's opportunity to spread out our enrollment. And so if we just kind of let the system balance out, we add a Harvest school in here, and we kind of balance amongst other schools. Considering splitting up the McKevitt boundaries, which is right in the center, and kind of utilizing that facility as a community school, like we discussed at the last meeting. We would be able to balance the remaining schools at about 370, with Glen City remaining at about 580 for not the foreseeable future, but for a while. So we'll be able to kind of reestablish those schools with full enrollment and balance them out and keep kind of sustainable enrollments at those schools for a while. So that's really the crux of overall the question here is, should we consider starting to look at more detail within our maps and balancing and making sure that, you know, these lines fall on the right side of streets and make sense for everybody. We can still develop a couple of very specific scenarios. We're not going to zoom in on this map, because whether or not the line is on one side of the street or the other side of the street is not really the conversation here today. But I think that we've raised a pretty significant question here.
Okay, Jerry, go ahead.
You're still muted.
Yeah, I had to find the right button. Okay. When I started being a principal, all of the boundaries in the town, it was a small town very similar to Santa Paula, all the school boundaries were changed. And I just want to make sure that that's one of basically the last things we do, because it needs a lot of input. Our town halls, the community really needs to step in and eventually be on board with it. It's a long process, and you only want to do it once. So it's got to be right. There's so many questions here. I'm glad we're talking about it, especially with the idea of putting a new school out at Harvest. But I think the boundaries is a really long discussion. It's one that's going to affect most of, well, not most, but a lot of the students in town, a lot of the families in town, even more so than, you know, just adding a school out at Harvest. I think we need to start talking about it, but it's got to be a long process for everybody to digest and get used to and accept and hear the pros and cons and talk about them, because it's probably the most emotional thing, one of them, that might come down the pike here in Santa Paula. So I just wanted to say that it's really hard on families.
You know, one of the things I think we all need to, you know, wrap our brains around also is that if we were to hire an architect to start the process of the Harvest School, you're looking at an opening in 2026. So there wouldn't be a Harvest School for these kids to go to until 2026. So that also gives us, and we wouldn't want to change the boundaries. I think Jerry's 100% right. We wouldn't want to change the boundaries until that school is there, because then we'd have to change it twice. So, and we don't want to do that. So, but I do think that we all have to understand, you know, we're talking about the new Harvest Community School, but it is a super long process to get a school built. You know, it's a 3-year process, and that's with all the input and everything like that. So if the new Harvest School is kind of a direction that eventually the strategic planning committee would like to go, we do know that there'll be a long period of input, and that'll also include the school boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll take a long time. And so, but overall, I think what we've demonstrated is that one, we can't really build a new school without reutilizing another school in town. We can't operate 7 elementary schools. There won't be enough students. However, I do think that overall, across the district, for the last few years, there's been requests for more facilities, more resources. you know, quite a bit at the high school level, but even at elementary schools themselves, you know, we'd like to get modernizing and updating and building some new facilities at some of our current schools. And so I think that by reutilizing a campus in town to address some of those other needs and taking advantage of the opportunity of the 8 acres plus the extra facilities on the east side of town where we are seeing our students being generated from, will create a more equitable solution across the city. And it will also allow us to utilize all of our facilities and our resources as strategically as possible. So that's my input. Any other discussion, questions? Let's see. We have the reference materials. We looked at it, you know, last week. I'm sorry, a couple weeks ago. That was the harvest area. There's your student generation. This is what we were talking about as far as that conservative number. You know, that single family homes only generating across the board about half a student. So, or at least we're only projecting about 1 student per 2 households. Even though if we get a strong conversion rate over there, we could get, you know, we could get more students than that. But even at this rate, we'll generate enough students to substantiate having a school on that side of town. So if there's no other questions about this or conversation about moving forward, Daniel?
There, so preschool, all right? So do we need to factor in preschool? I think we talked about preschool before, right? And so, you know, if the ratios are different, that affects the capacity of the school, which I don't think we haven't changed capacities at all yet. Because there would be smaller class sizes, right? So if you take a classroom, right, and make it a preschool, then that's going to effectively diminish your capacity. But we haven't allocated them at all, you know, even though we know, right, in November, right, we're trying to get 160 seats, right? So again, right, it's not to say that these numbers aren't, you know, true, right, to a certain extent, but again, I think that that's a factor that's missing. So, Jerry, go ahead.
I just had a real quick question for Kevin. When I first came on the board, we were given a number of around 500 students in a school to make it really self-funding, to pay the bills, all of the basics. Is that still about true? Because if it is, we've got a lot of schools that are losing, we're losing money on, and that's why we had considered several years ago that we might have to consolidate a couple of schools because the declining enrollment. But we were told it was about 500 students. Is that still true?
You know, we have seen pretty significant increases in our funding per ADA. So I'd say that number is probably a little bit lower, along with the fact that, you know, Santa Paula also receives a higher amount per ADA because of our high unduplicated count and other grants that we're able to qualify for. I think that administration would be pretty happy with operating schools in that 370 to 400, you know, range for a while. I don't think we would be trying to push to 500 students for our elementary schools. And, you know, overall, the way that we utilize our money, we could operate neutrally, you know, with a neutral budget if we had schools of those sizes. I do think that as we're starting to see pretty significant dips at the moment, and for the future, without converting more of those students from the east side and without that development continuing, I think that we'll still be having to consider rebalancing our students and reutilizing a school in town.
And I know that reutilizing a school in town would really help with that possibility of the high school and our building and how we're sitting on money that needs to go to facilities from our bond, high school bond, it would just kind of make sense. There's just so many things that are interrelated in these decisions that I think some people aren't aware of, that it's like a domino effect. So there's lots of things on the back burners.
Yes. Yeah, no, really. I mean, when we've talked quite a bit about the high school facility, at the board meeting coming up, you know, we're gonna be talking about the facilities a certain amount. But overall, we've talked about pools, band rooms quite a bit, the cafeteria are the big three, you know, that are still on the list. And really, in the end, particularly for the band room, you know, the big question has been where. And I think that you know, this idea that Renaissance could be relocated and we could open up that space to be utilized for the comprehensive high school is a huge opportunity. You know, not only will it give Renaissance more space to spread out a little bit on, and right now we're talking, you know, the McKevitt campus because it's in the middle of the town and it's easy to split up amongst those other schools that, you know, will be in need of students. But maybe in the coming years, we'll have maybe another site will yield, you know, better results for us. That's still obviously up for discussion. It's just kind of was the first scenario that we came up with. But it just gives everybody more space to grow. Because we're utilizing 8.3 acres that we have access to. But we need, you know, our comprehensive high school, our high school, we have one high school and one middle school. They need to be kind of centrally located in town. So we can't build a new Renaissance on the 8.3 acres on the east side of town. You know, we can't. So really, I think that's why an equitable solution is to spread out the elementary schools and then reutilize a campus that's kind of more in the center of town. Daniel, you were talking about preschool. You know, overall, and I can share with you because I know there was concern about just the 6th grade coming down, and we've finished we call our elementary school census, really just walking around to all the classrooms, taking note of what they're used for, seeing how many extra classrooms we have at every site. And so I can share that if you want real quick, but basically it's shown that
Sure, let's see it.
it's not as pretty as this here, but this is our little worksheet. I should say Doug's little worksheet. Mr. Henning walked around for this year and took note of what's going on in all the classrooms. So we have a hand.
Just real quick, I just saw Brenda's hand up. I wasn't sure if you'd like to wait or get in that comment, Brenda.
Sorry, I'll wait. That was just an accident. I was,
Oh,
but I
okay.
do have some questions. I'll wait till the end.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll burn through this pretty quickly here. Basically highlighted in yellow are rooms that are real classrooms, but aren't being utilized as a classroom for the most part at this point. You know, it's not housing permanently a teacher and I'm just going to say 20 to 30 students, you know, all the time. So they're mostly being used as something, you know, a lot of them are intervention, reading, math, PE, storage, but, you know, Bedell, you can see about 7 spaces that are, you know, originally built as classrooms that aren't classrooms right now. Blanchard, also about 7 spaces at the moment. And this actually still leaves the 2 preschool, the rooms we've already built out for preschool. So those aren't on the list. They're already marked for students. We still have about 7 spaces that are classrooms that aren't, you know, permanent classrooms. Even Glen City, which, you know, on first glance seems to be pretty impacted, has quite a few spaces that could be used for classrooms that aren't at this point. McKevitt is the smallest space. So, you know, this is going to be one of the tighter fits as we talk about sixth grade rolling up. Right now they have 2 fifth grade classes. And they have basically 2 spaces that could become those sixth grade classrooms. You know, there's still some class size adjustments and other discussions that we need to work through to see if, you know, 2 fifth graders are going to become 2 sixth grade classrooms, but there's 2 on campus. And they have some smaller spaces that are like their reading intervention, RSP, that aren't really suited to be a full-on classroom. So they still have those spaces, but they're just not full-on classrooms at this point. Feel 6 spaces that are traditional classrooms that aren't being used as classrooms at the moment. And Webster, 9 spaces that are classrooms but aren't being used as classrooms. And this doesn't include really the 3 classrooms that are technology down in the bottom corner that we intend to make into the preschool. So this is still 0 preschool impact because those rooms aren't classrooms. They're not in the capacity. They're technology offices right now that we're going to clear them out and actually add the 3 classrooms to their campus at this point. So, so significant space pretty much across the board. And then I think that also if we are considering reutilizing one of the campuses, that's obviously still a discussion about whether a preschool will go onto those campuses. Kurt.
All right, Brenda,
So
I guess if you wanna,
if,
sorry, I was gonna go for Brenda first since she had her hand up. If you think your comment is makes sense right now, to go ahead and chime in.
Go
So
ahead.
sorry, this is my first meeting and I walked in a little late, but I do have 2 kids that attend the district, and I want to be more involved and just kind of, I was going to listen, but now I have a bunch of questions. One of them is what is the new school that you're planning to potentially the proposal to build by Harvest? Would that be an elementary school?
Yes, elementary.
Okay, and the removal of Renaissance, where would you envision? I kind of understood that the plan is to move it to like a vacant elementary school.
Yes.
Well, there's no, wait, let me
I
make
mean,
that very
not
clear.
plan.
There is no plan right now for moving
Discussion.
Renaissance anywhere other than the fact that it has run out of space, right? And we could utilize that space, right, for Santa Paula High School, but there has been absolutely no decision made on that. So
Yes.
Okay. And earlier there was a woman, I didn't get her name, but she talked about redesigning like the lines and how that could potentially affect the community, or it could be very emotional. And right away, like I felt that. So has there been any talk with the community about this? Maybe I missed it and it's new, or is there like a committee for this proposed redesign of relining?
No, very beginning of the discussion about potentially doing that. So basically we're just saying if we decide to move forward with a Harvest school, that we'll need to have that discussion.
Okay. All right. Thank you for answering my questions.
Of course. And it would be, as Ms. Mead pointed out, and Mr. Weinstein, it would be a long discussion. We'd have about probably 2 years to work through, you know, exactly where all the lines were drawn, and another year to continue to communicate and adopt and prepare for those lines to be in effect as the Harvest School came on board and we started to shift which campuses were housing elementary students and other students.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
okay, any other comments? Kurt?
I'm going to come a little bit on this one. And we'll use Webster since that one's the one sitting in front of us as our example. Okay, room 1 currently used for speech. Well, Kevin, where does the speech therapist go because they do need a private space for their assessments? Where do those reading intervention teachers go? Where does the RSP go who needs private rooms for assessments?
Yeah, I think we,
Aspire has, okay, it needs its space. Cool Kids Cave. Hey, great, that could be, where does wellness go? That's your nurse. The intervention teachers at Bedell. And I'm sure that removing staff lounges would probably not be a winning thing. So I think we just found maybe less space than we thought. I mean, do we take one of those rooms, cut it into 3 or 4 small rooms for your RSP teachers, for your speech teachers? Are our brains going in that direction already, or are we saying, oops, we need to figure out where we put these people? Because the high school, we're fortunate we have so many small little spaces, but I'm somewhat familiar with Grace Hill. Where do the counselors go? Do they go back to the library and do their counseling sessions with kids sitting around them as they used to? Where do those other specialists go?
yeah, I think your point about cutting up classrooms or cutting up the spaces into smaller spaces is probably the direction we'll go. You know, it is still, it's going to be a conversation probably site by site, depending on who already has some of the little nooks and crannies that are great for carving out little offices versus taking one of these classrooms and making it into 4 smaller private spaces. But I think, you know, the point is, if you go around and visit all these classrooms, you'll find that oftentimes you're talking about, which is great right now because we have the space to do it. But when we don't, you know, we have 1 reading teacher working with 3 students in a whole 1,000 square foot classroom. You know, so yeah, we do need to cut that up and divide it up and reutilize those spaces as we push 6th grade into the schools at this point. Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely understand and accept that. You know, we need using a huge space for 3 or 4 kids is one thing, but we can't get them lost. We can't lose the sight of all of these specialists and all of these privacy concerns and privacy needs.
Oh yeah, no doubt. It's a conversation we're gonna have to kind of work through, and who needs it and who doesn't, and how do we create privacy into different spaces. But I think, you know, like still speaking of Webster, they have 2 5th grade classes at this point. And I know that the enrollment in those classes are pretty small. It's almost 1 6th grade class. And there's all these opportunities to carve out 1 classroom. So it's not that all these spaces need to be adjusted. You know, we really just need to make some small tweaks to find enough space for our 6th graders at all of our sites. You know, and there are a couple like this one where this is you know, the hardest conversation here. Like you said, we have our staff lounge and this space that's already, you know, kind of multi-use space. That's this 16 is, if for those of you familiar with McKevitt, it's actually the real big room in the back next to the library. Could almost be 2 full-size classrooms if you just put a wall down the center. So we just need to, you know, we have those conversations, and then with enough planning, I mean, granted the 6th graders we're talking about next year, so we'd have to step on it if we were going to actually drop another classroom somewhere. But I think really it's also about the same thing, still balancing our students across all of our schools.
Actually, that does bring up another question, which is kind of related, right? I mean, there is a lot of planning that has to happen for all of these different things, right? Maybe we're all committed out, right? But the planning for the 6th grade is moving back, right? How is that getting done?
This is the first step, and then we'll talk with, you know, Mr. Dr. Bond is is kind of the resident. He figures out how many teachers are going to be where based on the enrollment and how many classes, if we're going to do, combo classes, 5, 6s, where do we have our combos? Here, if we're going to have combo classes, he kind of starts to figure that out and discuss it with the principals and the teachers and the union. And so we start to have those conversations, and then we loop in the principals about how many spaces we need to carve out, and which out of all these spaces, which one do they think would be the most appropriate for those 6th grade classes. And then we start talking about the facility and the furniture and what do we need in that classroom to make it into a 6th grade classroom, and we get that stuff in place. And then Dr. Bond loops back around and makes sure that everybody has their assignments and they 6th grade teachers know where they're going next year. And probably oversimplified, but
because I would say, Kevin, that this is something that really is a concern of mine, because like I know at the middle school working here, the 6th grade teachers have worked long and hard to try to come up with pacing and planning and how everything is delivered in their 6th grade classes. And I think we're getting past the critical point to start bringing some of those teachers who have been educating the 6th grade children for many, many years into the discussion about how are we going to transition that into the elementary school, because it's super important, right? They've worked hard. And then, right now it's kind of even because all the 6th graders are at one site. How are we going to get that articulation among all the sites for the 6th graders for what they're doing? And then the question is are they still going to team teach? Are they going to go back to being single subject? And so like I would encourage, as part of this group with strategic planning, that we put the foot on the gas a little bit on that one, just so when the 6th graders are back, the transition can start happening a little sooner rather than later. So if there are speed bumps, we can figure them out prior to the kids showing up at school on the first day.
Yeah, definitely. I'm mostly speaking from the facilities standpoint, since that's more within my purview. But of course, yes, curriculum, Dr. Moore, Ed Bond, they all collaborate kind of on that. And I'm not Dr. Moore's here. I'm not sure if he wants to jump in on that.
Oh, so I know that I'm working with the superintendent in putting the plan together for the upcoming town hall meetings that we're going to do. We wanted to get past the design day on the 26th, and we're going to get, he and I have talked about getting those calendared, what the focus will be, and I'm sure that will be a huge part of the discussions. I'm thinking probably beginning sometime in October, November, and maybe a few in December, but we're definitely in the process of planning those.
Thanks. So I'm just looking at our agenda overall, and I guess Harvest School discussion is is that where we're at, Dr. Sandoval?
Yeah, I would say so. But I thought one of the things that we discussed in a earlier meeting was to do some town halls out there, to kind of gauge, interest, right, and demand. So, I mean, it's one thing to have, demographic studies that are kind of guessing at the model, how many kids we're going to get, but, I don't think it's all that difficult to go out there and start talking to families, and what, they envision. So I was just wondering whether we've thought about scheduling those, because I know we talked about them.
Right.
Yeah, so we actually have, Ed Bond has been meeting with the HOA they have a community room, I guess, the best way to describe it. And so the idea would be to have a couple of town halls in the community room in October. And so he's trying to schedule those with the HOA and make sure that we were able to use those community rooms.
So then, are there any So recommendations for moving forward with the Harvest School discussion. We hear definitely we'll be having that meeting out there. You know, we're issuing some pretty big RFPs, RFQs for other work, Isabel and stuff at the high school, and we're already under construction at the AME building, 600 building at the high school. Do we want to start considering, you know, some design contracts for Harvest? Considering it's a 3-year project from when we actually just start that.
Well, you did an RFQ for architects, right?
For Isabel.
For Isabel, but just art, but from there, you're gonna get, you know, a number of architectural firms already. So the idea may be to wait till you get those back, and then by that time, we might have a recommendation to hire one just as a design team. There's a very basic footprint that's been designed already by Flowing and Moody, but it's as basic as you can get. There is not a lot to it. It's basically just a library, an administration building, an NPR, and just a bunch of classrooms that they kind of scattered about. So and their estimates were all based on stick build and not using any portables, and they didn't know how much the construction, you know, the housing, the builder would be kicking in to bring us our utilities and our off-site improvements and all that kind of stuff. So it's really raw. There's really not much that we gain from it. So
Jerry, and then Susan. So Jerry, go ahead, unmute.
I know, Dan, it just takes me a minute. I was just going to say what Mr. Weinstein just said, but it seems like even if it was bare bones, it would be enough for right now. I think even if we didn't do it immediately, I think it would be wise to start it. But I think it was my understanding that those plans were enough to get us started for right now, especially looking at different facilities that I think are really important that we need to get moving on. And I just worry about us putting too much on our plate. I don't mean to delay the harvest, but I think a lot of discussion needs to start happening before we jump in with plans.
one clarification, because I know a lot of people here have heard about the plans for the Harvard School. Well, that was plans for a Harvard High School. So there's a more detailed plans for Harvest High School. I'm getting it straight from the architect. That's what they designed with Ed Cora. So they designed a high school and college center to be on the larger 15 acres. And then we gave that away. And then so Scott Gardner and Flowing and Moody came up with a very, very basic footprint design for in case we ever wanted to have an elementary school there.
Okay, Jerry, I'm going to let you go first, but we do need to get to Susan because I think you're going to respond quite.
I'll be really quick because that's not what the board was told. And the plans that we saw was for an elementary.
Yeah, I think it was the other way around. I think the 15 acres was going to be a K-8. And then what we have right now, the 8.3 acres was the high school, was considered the high school's plot. And there were plans for exactly what you said as far as like, what did you say? What kind of high school? It was like a CTE style, you know, high school. So I've seen the plans for the K-8 school.
Okay.
On the
all right, Susan, thank you for waiting.
Hi, I'm a resident of the Harvest community, and I know that when a lot of the families came and purchased the home, we were, you know, given the idea that we would have an elementary school within the area, and that is such a need. A lot of us do take our children out of the district just because of work and just the logistics of going to Bedell, and you know, it's just easier. So I really appreciate if you guys would, you know, come to the farmhouse and host some meetings so that you can hear other residents express their concerns and the need to have a neighbor, a hood school within, our area, because that's really, wanted and needed. Thank you.
Alrighty, so is there a general consensus? I mean, we still need to do those town halls, right? Out in Harvest, right? I don't think we're at a point where we need to design anything. We do have a lot of other things going on. I think, I don't know about everybody else, but Isabel is got to be the priority, right? But we certainly know that this is going to be a long process, so we don't want to shortchange it as well. So, I certainly would say, at the very least, we make sure we get those town halls scheduled, as soon as we can. And I would like to have, see the feedback, at this committee. If you've done the demographics, I don't know if we need to do any more deeper dives in those numbers. They give us a general sense of where we're going to be going. If we have a general sense of, what a harvest school would look like, maybe that makes sense to kind of talk about that as well at a future meeting. But I don't think that there's anything that says that, well, no, we still don't want to move, or we don't want to move forward, because I think we've already said we do want to move forward. So, I think what I would like to see, right, is more kind of timelines of, okay, well, when are we making decisions? What has to happen before any decision is made? Because at this point, does anybody feel like, we should just come to the board and say, yes, we're building a harvest school. There we go. Let's hire the architect. I'm not 100% sure, right, what more information we need to do that. Other than, certainly I want to hear from the residents, right? And maybe assess demand a little bit better, right? And hear from them right before we go ahead and start, developing plans. But this is just me, so what do you guys think? Todd, help me out, dig me out of my hole.
Yeah, so I just think that a lot of people have ideas, and I think that it's important for us to be super transparent in our ideas without being worried about how is everybody going to react when an idea is put on the table, because until the ideas are put on the table, we're never going to move forward. Like, I feel like I've seen the last two meetings us dance around, maybe having one of those schools not be an elementary school anymore if we built the Harvest, because we could maybe repurpose it like we talked a little bit about today. But I think we get worried, right? Then is the conversation going to get to, oh my gosh, they're closing this school, right? And that's not what we're saying. But we have to put those ideas out there if we want to move forward in using our facilities the best way we can for Santa Paula, because this is not a 1-year plan. This is not a 2-year plan. This is a 5, 10, 15-year plan. Many of us, maybe myself included, at the full outlay, I look at these numbers in 2035, I might be ready to retire, but we can see all the great things that have happened. But until we can honestly talk about, hey, maybe there is a need for this school because we listen to people who live up there and we're worried about capturing those people and making the best community, and we haven't even really talked a lot about the preschool. And to me, that's a super exciting thing that's going on in Santa Paula that I think is also going to increase capacity in those elementary schools, 2 of them for sure, right? And something that would have to be taken into account when we're looking at the elementaries and maybe redrawing. Like Jerry says, redrawing those boundaries can't be taken lightly. So I think we have to look at what do we want our outcome to be at the end of the day, and how do we best get there, and have a couple of plans and not be worried and about saying ideas that people might go, Todd, that's crazy. We would never use this for that. We just need to try to throw those ideas out, then narrow down to the best ideas and realize it's not going to happen in a year, right? But in 10 years, is this district going to be better positioned for the students and the community of Santa Paula? Because of some of the decisions we're going to make this year and next year. All right, I'm done.
Okay, Brenda had her hand up first.
Hi, is there any evidence that there's a high need for another elementary school? I know that the residents at Harvest want one, but is there enough students to enroll? And what would happen to the other elementary schools that are struggling with enrollment? If we were to open Harvest, wouldn't that impact those schools? Because in the charts I was looking at, there were some schools with elementary schools with low enrollment compared to like McKevitt.
Yes.
Dave, did you want to take that?
Yeah, can I?
Sorry, I guess.
So,
I know
yeah.
I asked a lot of questions. I'm sorry. I can repeat them slowly.
No, yeah. Basically, that's what we were kind of working on. So yeah, that data shows that there will be enough students in the Harvest area to support a school over there. However, the area where our schools are currently located are declining enrollment pretty substantially, and so there won't be enough students to support all 6 elementary schools where they're currently at. So that's why we're saying if we want to build a school in the Harvest area, we will need to repurpose one of the elementary schools in town. So you're pretty much right in line. That's exactly what you were seeing.
And do you have an idea what elementary school would this impact, or would be the one that you would use for Renaissance or?
Yeah, so I guess maybe you came in after the.
Yes, I'm sorry.
But the kind of, to Todd's point, to not beat around the bush, although it did say on that slide, the proposal on hand is that it would be McKevitt. Although really, I think if we if we're committed to the Harvest school, then yes, we do need to repurpose a school in town. I think that's its own kind of study to really kind of dig into the opportunities at all of our campuses and what that would do. So it was just easy to single out McKevitt for this conversation, I think. And I'll yield to David.
Oh, I think that a lot of parents in the community would be very upset if McKevitt were to be used as a Renaissance. Not only the community members that live there, but now everyone has to move their children within driving distance now for those that are near McKevitt, just to accommodate the Harvest community.
Yeah, so that's what our that demographics company helps us kind of divide it up so that nobody ends up. I think we were able to demonstrate, and we would dig into this information as we looked at where all of as we would divide up the map. But I think we can pretty quickly demonstrate that nobody would be further than what they call a 3-minute drive. And I forget what the actual walking distance would be as a crow flies. I want to say it's within a 1.5 miles of school. And once again, I know that McKevitt, there would be quite a few people living in that area that wouldn't be happy with that school being repurposed. But it is
I think it's important that you reach out to parents before you even get an architect involved, because that sounds like very serious, to let parents at McKevitt know that this is what is happening, because it's news to me.
It's not what is happening. Yeah, we would definitely get out with town halls and kind of talk to everybody and make sure everybody knew about what proposals were and get our feedback.
So I'm going to let David have the floor.
Yeah. So one of the things, because I have the unfortunate privilege of signing the out-of-district transfers, and we're getting a lot of them from Harvest, and I'm also purchasing a home over there, so we go over there periodically and run into people that are also purchasing, and I ask them, because I work for the district, most of them in the houses that are surrounding the one that we're purchasing are younger families with kids. And so I asked them, will you be bringing your students to our district? We have an awesome district, and I've gotten a lot of different responses, but the overarching answer is no. We're going to take our students to Ventura or Oxnard, where we came from. And so I think I think this is something that we do need to make a move on and consider, because the harvest is a part of Santa Paula, and we've got to understand that we've got families that are coming in, and I've heard comments from parents. Yeah, we've driven by some of the schools, but I just don't know. I think for right now, I think we're gonna keep our students in Ventura and Oxnard, and I'm hearing that. And so as the city grows and we've got new development coming in, those are families that could be a part of our school system and a part of our numbers that we're trying to increase and sort of head off the numbers of students that are leaving. And we do have a lot of students leaving. And when I addressed this in previous meetings, we talked about, well, there are certain reasons why they're leaving. It could be work, it could be childcare, and those different reasons. But I'm seeing more and more students leaving because of a program that a school offers in another district, which is why we're doing the work that we're doing. And we're working hard to speed that process up so that our schools are schools that students from even other districts want to come, because they're hearing of the great things that we're doing. So preschool's one. Todd mentioned preschool. That's one way of we're working to secure and keep our students with us, but we're also working hard to make our schools innovative and fun places to be for students. So I just wanted to throw that in, because I don't think this is something that we can push down a year or 2 years and just keep talking about it. So.
One other thing, I just wanted to, acknowledge that Maria asked a question, right? I do want to mention that this is a Brown acted committee, right? Which has an agenda that we do have to follow. So unfortunately, that's not necessarily, part of our agenda for today. So we can't really, really answer that question. I know Kevin did put something in the chat to hopefully help that. But I just wanted to make sure that, that was clear. Chris, did you want me to say that comment? The demographic of the home buying is families are purchasing there because other towns properties available for purchase are low and possible not affordable.
I just feel that's why the homes are selling, is because the demographics are changing. If you go on Zillow or if you go on realtor.com, you will see, if you look at Oxnard, Ventura, Camarillo demographics of home buying, the houses really aren't selling due to the price costs. So some families are moving to Santa Paula because they want to get out of those big towns. They're tired of the traffic. They're tired of crime rates. They're tired of, 20 cars parked on one street and they can't park their car. So that's why people are moving to Santa Paula. And that's what I've got through from the PTA point of view at Santa Paula High School. The harvest, people are purchasing into the harvest area because they want to get rid of the demographics that they're coming from. So yeah, try to get them into a Santa Paula Unified. Most of them don't work in Santa Paula. They work, in Santa Clarita, they work in Ventura, they work in Oxnard. So as a convenient to that parent, yeah, they're going to take their kid to a different maybe school district and not to Santa Paula because, they got to drive 35 minutes out or, 45 minutes out because of the traffic problem, of living in Santa Paula. But I think to go back to what Miss Brenda said, we really, and what Miss Jerry Mead said too, we really, I think, need to listen to the people of Santa Paula and have those town hall meetings, just because, you know, we are a small community and our members in our community should be heard over anybody else whenever making a decision, because it's going to impact our futures as educators, you know, people who live here, people who own homes in the town versus renting kind of concept. So I think what Miss Mead said and what Miss Brenda Valdez said, we really need to, I think, listen to our town hall folks.
Also, I just want to add to include the entire community, not just one area of town. Include people from the east side, west side, from the hill, everyone about this major decision. If you were to eliminate McKevitt and make it Renaissance, I do believe that it would make people very upset. So please include everybody in the decision making.
Agreed. Right. Does anybody else have any other thoughts? I do want to be cognizant of the time, right? Because we were scheduled to adjourn at 5 o'clock. But I want to make sure that anybody who does have any comments gets them in. All right. So we talked a lot about a lot of different things, right? You know, I don't know when our next scheduled meeting is. We'll have to get back to you guys to finalize what that time is. And so, you know, with that, I think we'll go ahead and adjourn. So thank you everybody for coming and giving your input. So I thought it was a great discussion. Thank you.